The morning sun barely pierced through the gray clouds hovering over the small city as Malik adjusted the straps of his worn-out backpack and approached the local bank. The asphalt reflected faint patches of rain from the night before, making his old sneakers slosh with each step. He had walked past this bank countless times before, always avoiding the large glass doors that seemed reserved for the wealthy and the successful. Today, however, something had changed in him. There was a sense of resolve he had never felt before, a quiet confidence that came not from pride in wealth, but from the knowledge that his life, in ways unseen by the world, had shifted. His shoes were tattered, the soles barely clinging to the leather, the threads worn thin from years of walking through crowded streets, potholes, and muddy alleys. Onlookers might see him as just another poor boy, a shadow among the city's bustling masses. But inside, Malik carried a secret, one that would shock anyone who judged him by appearances alone. As he stepped into the bank, the automatic doors whispered open, and the polished interior revealed a sharp contrast to his rugged exterior. The marble floors gleamed under fluorescent lights, the air-conditioned chill brushing against his worn hoodie. People looked up, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed judgment. A few whisperings echoed in the background. "Isn't it the boy who lives near the corner market? He looks like he can barely afford lunch." Malik ignored them, his focus fixed ahead on the long line leading to the teller windows. He wasn't here to explain himself. He wasn't here to plead. He was here for what he had earned in silence, what he had built without fanfare, hidden away from those who only saw his exterior. His journey to this point had not been an easy one. Malik grew up in the city's most neglected neighborhood, where opportunity was rare and dreams often went unfulfilled. From an early age, he learned the delicate art of survival, how to stretch a dollar, how to keep hope alive in the face of despair, and most importantly, how to work quietly, tirelessly, while the world overlooked him. While other children played with toys, Malik experimented with small investments, learning the rhythms of the stock market from library books and free online courses, using borrowed laptops and public computers. He sold homemade crafts, collected discarded electronics, and bartered his time and skills for opportunities. Every penny saved, every risk calculated, every sleepless night spent learning had contributed to this moment. He wasn't just walking into a bank. He was walking into the culmination of years of strategic patience, hidden genius, and relentless ambition. As he approached the teller, a young woman behind the counter glanced up, her expression hovering between surprise and mild pity. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but tinged with an undertone often reserved for those she assumed needed guidance or charity. Malik nodded, smiling faintly, the kind of smile that hinted at unspoken triumph. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady and composed. "I'd like to check my account balance." The words were simple, almost mundane, but they carried the weight of all the nights he had spent worrying, planning, and working. The teller typed in his account information, eyes skimming the screen, and that's when it happened. The color drained from her face as the numbers appeared on her monitor. Malik's account balance was astronomical, far beyond what anyone expected, far beyond the lives of those who whispered behind his back as he walked in. The sum was the result of years of meticulous planning, early investments, and fortunate opportunities, seized with precision. The teller's mouth closed, and opened again, her professional demeanor faltering as she tried to process the reality in front of her. Other customers nearby began to notice the commotion, drawn by the mixture of disbelief and curiosity. Whispers spread like wildfire. "That's his account? How did a boy like him? He's a millionaire?" Malik remained calm, serene even, as if this reaction had been part of his expectation all along. For Malik, the significance of this moment wasn't the shock of others. It wasn't the envy or admiration. It was a personal victory, a quiet affirmation that had overcome every obstacle, every doubt, and every circumstance that life had thrown at him. The ripped shoes he wore were not a symbol of poverty. They were a testament to endurance, to the journey, to the invisible work that often goes unnoticed but ultimately defines true success. That day, the bank was more than a place for transactions. It was a stage where appearances clashed with reality, where the world learned a lesson about humility, perception, and the quiet power of determination. As Malik collected his receipt, the teller finally looked at him directly, her eyes wide, a mixture of apology and awe evident in her gaze. He nodded politely and walked out, the soft sound of his worn shoes against the marble floor echoing like a subtle reminder. Greatness is not always announced with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives quietly in ripped shoes, with a balance that shocks the world. Outside, the sun had broken through clouds, casting golden light on the streets he had walked for years, illuminating a path he had carved silently. For Malik, this was just the beginning, the moment when the world had begun to see what he already knew, that success is not about appearances, but about the vision, discipline, and courage to turn what seems impossible into reality. Malik stepped out of the bank with the receipt folded neatly in his pocket, the numbers on that slip seared into his memory. He walked along the streets that had been his playground, his battlefield, and his classroom. People noticed him differently now. Some paused mid-step, squinting to see if they had really just witnessed what they thought they saw. The ragged boy with the torn shoes, the one everyone had ignored or pitted, had an account that could rival even the city's most prominent business owners. Yet Malik did not let the stares or murmurs disturb him. He was accustomed to invisibility, to being underestimated, and he had learned long ago that sudden recognition could be a distraction if not handled with care. By noon, the news of the bank boy miracle began circulating through social media. A passerby had snapped a photo of the teller's stunned expression, posted it online, and within hours it went viral. Comments flooded in, a mix of awe, disbelief, admiration, and judgment. How did he do it? People asked. Is this some sort of scam? Others were inspired. If he can do it, maybe I can too. Malik watched this unfold quietly, choosing not to respond publicly. He had learned that real power lay not in broadcasting triumph, but in letting actions speak louder than reactions. That afternoon, Malik returned to his small apartment, a modest space he had long ago outfitted for function rather than comfort. The worn furniture, the peeling paint, and the tiny kitchen did nothing to hide the fact that he had lived simply, always prioritizing investment over indulgence. As he sat at his desk, he reviewed his portfolio once again, not for reassurance, but as a ritual, a way to maintain clarity in a world that seemed determined to misunderstand him. Each number, each investment, each carefully calculated decision reminded him of the path he had walked. This was a result of patience, research, and an unwillingness to give up, even when the world said he was insignificant. But the attention brought new challenges. Calls from journalists, curiosity seekers, and even self-proclaimed financial gurus began to flood his phone. They wanted interviews, stories, features. They wanted the rags to riches narrative that had become a cliche. Malik ignored them, knowing that exposure could bring both opportunity and risk. He remembered how easily the world could judge, exploit, or twist one story for profit. Instead, he focused on his own priorities, growing his investments, helping his community, and ensuring that his success could benefit more than just himself. His neighborhood, long neglected and overlooked, had always been a source of inspiration for him. He had seen potential where others only saw decay, and now he had the means to make a tangible difference. As days passed, Malik began to see the social shift his presence caused. Neighbors who had once ignored him now greeted him warmly, and children who had played around him without acknowledgement now looked up with admiration. Even local shop owners, who had once dismissed him as just another poor kid, offered smiles and encouragement. Yet, not all attention was positive. Some individuals, fueled by jealousy or skepticism, started plotting ways to discredit him. Rumors spread that he had inherited the money, that it was stolen, or that it was a product of deceitful schemes. Malik knew he would have to navigate these waters carefully, using intellect and patience rather than confrontation. Despite the external chaos, Malik's internal life remained focused and calm. He began visiting local schools and community centers, speaking to young people about perseverance, financial literacy, and the importance of vision. He shared lessons he had learned the hard way, emphasizing that success was not only measured by wealth, but by the impact one could create. His sessions inspired many, but also sparked skepticism among adults who could not reconcile the image of a boy in torn shoes when men are capable of guiding the next generation. Malik paid little attention to them. He had spent too many years proving things quietly, and he understood that respect was earned over time, not demanded at first glance. One evening, Malik's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. On the line was a representative from a prestigious investment firm. They had heard of his account, the sudden rise of a young financial prodigy, and they wanted to meet. Their tone was polite but laced with curiosity, tinged with disbelief. Malik listened carefully, weighing their offer not in terms of money, but in terms of alignment with his vision. He agreed to a meeting, knowing that this could be a chance to expand his influence while remaining true to his principles. The meeting itself was surreal. The firm's office was sleek, bathed in polished wood and glass, with walls adorned by portraits of accomplished investors and financial milestones. Malik, in his ripped shoes and modest hoodie, stood out starkly against the backdrop of suits and polished shoes. The executives exchanged glances, unsure whether to be impressed or dismissive. Malik, however, spoke with calm confidence, presenting his strategy, explaining the meticulous planning behind his portfolio, and demonstrating an understanding of risk and opportunity that left the room silently nodding. By the time he left, the executives were not only convinced of his talent, but eager to collaborate, offering him options that could accelerate his growth while keeping him in control. Returning home that night, Malik reflected on how drastically life had shifted in a matter of days. The attention, the opportunities, the whispers of fame, they were new, uncharted territory. Yet he felt grounded, anchored by the years of struggle that had built his character. He knew that while his account had shocked the world, the real journey was only beginning. Wealth could open doors, but it could not replace discipline, wisdom, or purpose. Malik's goal was no longer simply to amass fortune. It was to create impact, to change perceptions, and to prove that the boy in ripped shoes could indeed reshape not only his own destiny, but the world around him. In the weeks following the viral revelation, Malik's life transformed in ways both exhilarating and daunting. The city that had long ignored him now buzzed with speculation. Social media was ablaze with theories about the bank boy millionaire, some admiring, others suspicious, and a few openly hostile. Malik had learned early in life that success rarely came without scrutiny, but the sheer scale of attention was overwhelming even for him. Every street corner seemed to host whispers, every business transaction attracted curiosity, and every casual outing carried the weight of public judgment. Yet Malik faced a storm with the same quiet determination that had carried him through years of hardship. Focused, patient, and guided by an unwavering moral compass. Despite the external noise, the most formidable challenges came from within. Wealth, particularly sudden visibility, attracts more than admiration. It draws envy, greed, and attempts at manipulation. Malik received offers that seemed generous, but were laced with conditions he found morally questionable. Some investors promised astronomical returns if he redirected funds into ventures that exploited vulnerable populations. Others offered partnerships that were little more than veiled attempts to control his decision-making. Malik politely declined each one, understanding that true power lay in independence, in the ability to act according to principle rather than persuasion. This discernment became his shield, one built not by capital, but by years of careful observation and inner discipline. Even those closest to him felt the ripple effect. His mother, who had always worried about her son's future, oscillated between pride and fear. She saw the news clips, the online articles, and the bewildered faces of neighbors, and she struggled to reconcile this new reality with the boy who had once struggled to afford school supplies. Friends from the neighborhood approached him with a mix of curiosity and expectation. Some sought guidance, inspired by his ascent. Others harbored envy, finding it difficult to accept that someone they had long considered ordinary could achieve extraordinary success. Malik handled these interactions with tact, offering advice and mentorship where possible, yet maintaining boundaries to prevent exploitation. Amid these challenges, a new figure entered Malik's life, a man named Leonard Graves, a seasoned financial magnate with a reputation for ruthless negotiation. Leonard had heard about Malik's improbable rise and saw an opportunity to acquire a young prodigy's talents for his own gain. He requested a private meeting, claiming admiration while subtly probing Malik's vulnerabilities. In the sleek boardroom, Leonard's eyes scanned Malik's unassuming appearance, noting every torn seam of his shoes and every hint of humility in his posture. "You've achieved remarkable success," Leonard said smoothly, "but greatness can always be multiplied with the right guidance and the right partners." Malik listened carefully, aware of the underlying message: join me or risk being left behind. Malik's reply was measured, deliberate. "I value independence," he said, his voice steady. "I've built my path carefully, and I intend to continue guiding it according to my principles. While I respect your experience, I must make decisions that align with my vision, not someone else's ambition." Leonard's expression flickered, a mixture of surprise and irritation. But Malik remained calm. He knew that intimidation, flattery, and subtle pressure were tactics often used to sway the unprepared. Malik's preparation, patience, and moral clarity allowed him to resist, reinforcing the lesson he had learned through years of struggle. Wealth without integrity is hollow, and influence without principle is dangerous. Meanwhile, the media frenzy continued. Headlines exaggerated his story, portraying him as a miracle boy, a prodigy, a social anomaly. Some narratives romanticized his journey. Others questioned its legitimacy. Malik chose not to engage directly, understanding that public perception was fickle and that explanations rarely altered opinion. Instead, he focused on tangible action, funding local initiatives, supporting underprivileged schools, and creating opportunities for those whose potential had long been overlooked. Slowly, his community began to see not only his financial success, but also the thoughtfulness and care behind it. His influence, once measured only by numbers on a screen, began to extend into the lives of real people, changing futures in meaningful ways. But success always brings friction. Leonard Graves, frustrated by Malik's refusal to conform, began a campaign of subtle sabotage, using influence to spread rumors and cast doubt on Malik's character. Competitors attempted to imitate his strategies, trying to undermine his investments, while some opportunistic acquaintances pressed him for financial favors that would strain even the most generous of hearts. Each challenge required Malik to navigate with a delicate balance of assertiveness and discretion. He learned that true leadership demanded more than intelligence or financial acumen. It required emotional resilience, strategic foresight, and an unyielding adherence to principle. Even personal relationships became tests. Malik's growing prominence introduced him to people who valued him for what he had rather than who he was. Friendships were tested, alliances questioned, and loyalty scrutinized. Malik realized that the journey from poverty to wealth, while life-changing, could also be isolating. He confronted moments of doubt, wondering if the cost of success was too high if it meant constant vigilance against deceit and betrayal. Yet every time uncertainty arose, he reflected on the boy who had walked into the bank with ripped shoes, remembering the discipline, perseverance, and courage that had brought him this far. By the end of Section 3, Malik had not only maintained his success, but had begun to shape a legacy. He understood that true triumph was not measured in balances or viral stories, but in the ability to remain steadfast amid temptation and scrutiny, to act with integrity when shortcuts were offered, and to lift others while navigating personal challenges. The ripped shoes he once wore symbolized resilience, and they had become a quiet emblem of the values that no wealth could ever compromise. Malik's journey was no longer merely about financial victory. It was about proving that character, vision, and morality could coexist with extraordinary success, even in a world eager to challenge both. The months following Malik's rise to prominence were a delicate balancing act between opportunity and vigilance. The boy in ripped shoes had become a symbol, a living testament that determination, intelligence, and integrity could outshine appearances. Yet, the more visible he became, the more intense the scrutiny and challenges he faced. Every financial decision, every public appearance, and every philanthropic act was analyzed, debated, and sometimes criticized. Malik had learned long ago that true success is never quiet, but he also knew that the noise of the world could not dictate his actions. His focus remained unshakable, to turn his wealth into meaningful impact while staying true to the principles that had carried him from the streets to the bank vaults. One morning, Malik received an invitation to a prestigious city award ceremony, an event typically reserved for business magnates, philanthropists, and influential leaders. It was the ultimate recognition of his achievements, but he faced a dilemma. The black tie event required formal attire, and the contrast between his humble upbringing and the glamorous environment was stark. Malik could have hired stylists, bought expensive suits, and conformed to expectations, but he chose a different path. He opted for attire that was respectful but not ostentatious, a subtle statement that who he was and what he had accomplished mattered more than superficial appearances. As he entered the grand hall, whispers of astonishment filled the room. Many who had doubted him, who had labeled him the poor boy, now watched in awe as he walked with quiet confidence. Media cameras flashed, capturing the moment, yet Malik's attention was not on the spectacle. He was focused on the people whose lives he could touch, the young students he had inspired, the neighborhoods he had supported, and the countless individuals whose potential had been overlooked. The applause he received was not just for wealth, it was for resilience, vision, and the courage to rise against odds that had seemed insurmountable. During the ceremony, Malik was called to the stage to accept the Young Visionary Award, an honor recognizing innovation, impact, and leadership. Standing at the podium, he looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some skeptical, and others deeply moved. He began to speak, not about numbers or investments, but about perseverance, ethics, and the importance of giving back. True success, he said, is not measured by how much wealth you acquire, but by how many lives you touch and how faithfully you adhere to your values. Every challenge, every failure, and every doubt is an opportunity to build character. If I have learned anything, it is that your journey matters far more than your destination. The room fell silent, the weight of his words resonating with everyone present. Meanwhile, Leonard Graves, the seasoned magnate who had attempted to sway Malik, watched from the audience, his usual confidence shaken. Malik's unwavering integrity and strategic brilliance had neutralized every attempt at manipulation. Graves realized that influence achieved through force or intimidation could never match the impact of leadership grounded in principle. Even the media, initially eager to sensationalize Malik's story, now highlighted his character, his mentorship, and his ability to transform not only his own life, but the lives of those around him. Outside the ceremony, Malik's efforts began to bear fruit in tangible ways. Schools that had received the support flourished, with students achieving higher graduation rates and gaining scholarships previously thought impossible. Local businesses, inspired by his mentorship programs, saw growth and revitalization. Community projects funded by his initiatives created safe spaces for youth and fostered creativity, learning, and opportunity. Malik's influence extended far beyond his personal achievements. It reshaped the very fabric of the city he had once navigated as an overlooked boy in tattered shoes. Yet, perhaps the most profound victory came in the quiet moments, away from headlines, awards, and recognition. Malik often returned to his old neighborhood, walking the same streets, speaking to children and elders alike. He reminded them that success was not an abstract concept reserved for the privileged, but a possibility rooted in persistence, courage, and vision. He shared his story not as a tale of material wealth, but as a blueprint of resilience. The ripped shoes, once a symbol of poverty, had become a metaphor for endurance, humility, and the journey of transformation. As Malik's journey unfolded, the world began to understand that appearances are deceiving. Those who had judged him solely on his torn shoes, his modest attire, or his quiet demeanor were humbled by the reality of his accomplishments. Wealth and recognition had never changed Malik's character. Instead, they amplified the values he had cultivated in obscurity: discipline, wisdom, compassion, and integrity. His story became a lesson in perception, reminding society that true power and success often reside in unexpected places and in people who persevere quietly while the world watches. In the final moments of reflection, Malik stood at the window of his modest apartment, overlooking the streets that had shaped him. The city buzzed below, unaware of the subtle transformations occurring in its heart. He knew the journey was ongoing. New challenges, new opportunities, and new responsibilities awaited. But for the first time, he felt a profound sense of completion. The boy in ripped shoes had not only achieved financial triumph, but had demonstrated that character, vision, and perseverance could redefine destiny. Malik smiled quietly, the faint glow of the setting sun reflecting on his face. His story was more than a tale of riches. It was a legacy of hope, resilience, and inspiration. The account balance that once shocked the teller in the bank was a mere number compared to the immeasurable impact he now had on the world. And as the city moved forward, the boy who had walked into a bank with torn shoes had proven, without a doubt, that greatness could emerge in the most unassuming places, transforming not only his life but the lives of countless others.